we can have an open conversation. I'm available for any discussions or any specific questions.
Hi, Steve. How you doing? Just a few questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
With the SMS rollout that we had, from my recollection, I think we had about 2 years notification to roll out the SMS and get it implemented, and now we've only got something like 10 months. How come this is? And also, we've not heard anything from our surveyor in EASA at all. There's been no mention, nothing out of Cologne or anything to us. How come the sudden urgency, do you think? And, how come it's suddenly come around so quickly in such a tight timeline?
Yeah, it's a great question. I agree with you completely. Actually, I've been watching in the background EASA, let's say, creating the information that the competent authorities are going to need. And a lot of this has only been happening in the last several months.
Hmm.
So, because of that, whilst they have a stated implementation date, we actually did the same with SMS in the 145.
Yeah.
The difference being we still had an implementation date, but the thing was there was a, let's say, a window, and it only closed. The window only actually closed for in December 24.
Yeah.
Uh, Historically, if you remember, if you were during 2024, if you were a brand new 145, you had to have SMS from the get go. But if you were an existing 145, you had a transition period. And the only thing that hasn't happened, EASA hasn't actually stated that there will be a definitive transition period. But I do not imagine that there will not be such.
Can you take it to my desk?
So I'm expecting that whilst we have an implementation date, the transition period means that it's highly unlikely that any organization will receive a regulatory finding, at least for the first 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. And also, as well, there's been mention about obviously ISO 27001. Now, before I returned back into aviation, I've been in aviation many years, but I took a bit of a hiatus and went and became a lead auditor for ISO standards. So I was qualified in 9 quality, 14 environment, and 45 health and safety. When I applied to become a 27001 auditor, I was refused. I was kicked back because I didn't have enough experience in the world of IT or data
Mhm,
or cyber. So,
mhm.
how do the authorities expect people like ourselves who are, compliance managers and, just learning about SMS and safety suddenly become expert knowledge in terms of cyber and being able to audit that area?
And another good question, and clearly they can't.
Yeah.
It's not reasonable, and the wording is such that EASA is expecting you to extract from the document, from 2700 document, the relevant parts.
Yeah.
So
Now,
the
now,
needs there
yeah, I mean,
needs a
You're
sorry.
phased
using
approach.
color on your face.
I also
Use
think, and I put myself in this position, I also
sugar level.
think that what will be, let's say, relevant will be to include IT experts as subject matter experts where their contribution will add value to the process.
Yeah, you see, the thing is that again, one of the biggest concerns is that the ISO standards, and again, I'm certainly au fait with 3 of them, are written by a global platform, and we used to call it written in ISOEs because
Yes.
it took me almost 4 years being in the role to really fully understand the requirements of ISO. Now, the 27,001 there, what's called the common standards. So 65% of what was in 27,001 should also be in 914 and 45. So context, interested parties, context, scope, management review, and etc. is pretty much prevalent throughout all of them. But again, to just take that standard, which you have to purchase, and it's quite expensive to purchase as well. So it's very good that you guys have come up with a bit of a a checklist against ISO 27001, for somebody to sit down and to just digest it and understand it, I would say is absolutely impossible. So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that.
Let me take you on a very, very short journey, Nathan, because I've been in aviation for 50 years now, incredible period of time. And during the development, so I was there at the beginning of the GAA, at the beginning of the 1990s. I was there when EASA took control in 2002 to 2003. And I am aware of all the disconnects and the gaps.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example, I'm from the UK. Although I've lived in Bulgaria for the last 20 years, I'm from the UK. And the UK, historically, the UK CAA was a design organization, was a general organization, but they had a huge bank of standards. And we still have some of these standards now. The UK CAA, if you look for general standards for storage conditions and so on, they're there. They're in the documentation. Now, I was expecting that at a certain point, EASA would develop European aviation standards that fit 100% with EASA's requirements. They haven't done this. Rather, what they do is just disconnect and point you in another direction, which doesn't satisfy the requirement, because ICAO is not the same as EASA. If you look at ISO 9001 2015, that is not the same as the aviation quality
Absolutely, it's not.
systems that we have.
Totally different. Totally different.
And that's part of the problem. So increasingly, EASA is doing this, and they're leaving it in, let's say, in a generic form. And what they then do is step back and say, you need to go to your local regulatory authority. So EASA does not even engage. If you try and have a conversation, the first thing EASA wants to know is, where are you? You say, I'm in France, Belgium, Germany, Bulgaria. It doesn't matter. So, you need to speak to your regulatory authority. Well, here's the reality check. Today in Cologne, in the EASA building, there are 1,000 people. 1,000 people in all different disciplines. When you go to your local authority, they're not magicians. We could poke them with a stick, but they are no more knowledgeable than we are, and that information is not there. So it's a mess. But just to say again, I do not expect it to become an immediate problem for the organizations for many, many months. And as it starts to unfold and unwind, then we will get more information. But in order to comply with the EASA, I should not have to purchase ISAO documents.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I've got copies of them anyway, and if anyone wants a nice bootleg copy, contact me.
Of course, but it still should not be like this. The EASA should not be pointing at other people's standards and saying you have to how can the regulatory authority audit against something that you have to purchase? They can't.
Yeah. No.
The regulatory authority can only audit you against EASA documents. They can't say you're not complying with ISO document XYZ, because the next question is, where does it say I have to comply? And it doesn't. EASA doesn't say you must comply with this. It says this is where you will get the information, what you need to use, speak to your regulatory authority. And the regulatory authority say, well, I don't know. And so it goes on. And what I found, because I'm in Bulgaria, so my regulatory authority is relatively, let's say, constrained in terms of funding. They don't have the money. If you go to Germany, the LBA, or you go to Holland and Belgium, these authorities have got, and France, of course, they've got huge budgets. Mm-hmm. So you can't expect, the Romanian or the Bulgarian authority to develop processes the same. But let's be honest, why should they? Why should 27 regulatory authorities independently develop something that is relevant for everybody.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stepping back by EASA. It's not correct. And in some areas, I'm not a fan of the way they work. And I see how they create tomorrow's problem is created today by the way EASA, does not engage in an appropriate way.
Yeah, because the one thing I'm hoping is that our system, again, we're a small MRO. There's like, in terms of nominated, there's myself, there's the accountable, there's the warehouse manager, and that's pretty much it. We're a small business. Obviously, I'm compliance and safety with a little bit of experience in the ISO, but not 27001. But the one thing I'm hoping is that a lot of our IT systems are managed by a national company. So,
Okay.
so if someone sends me an email with like an attachment, it gets quarantined, and I have to ring up and ask them to release that email and so on. So I'm hoping that will go some way.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
And if that is written into your process and procedures, I don't think you're going to find yourself in the wrong side of the requirements.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. No problem. All right. Well, thanks for your
Yeah,
time,
thank
Steve.
you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments?
Yeah, hi Steve, it's Paul Foster.
Hello, Paul.
Hi. So we're going to have to start auditing our suppliers. I'm in the same position as Nathan. I'm only up the road from Nathan, I actually know him. So some of our suppliers are not aviation approved, so they don't hold IASA or CAA approval. We accept on CFC. They are small, very small organisations. How can I audit them against their IT system when it may be, a family-run business where there's just two people? They will have these.
Right. The question, Paul, is how are they impacting your IT system? If they're doing is sending you documents, it shouldn't be an issue. If they're sending you information by email, then if you have a process to, let's say, assess your email, I mean,
we do. We have the same. We have the same sort of process as Nathan does. I mean, I've got my IT manager on this webinar as well.
So I don't see that. For example, I don't see that there's a requirement for you to go and audit a vendor to you, their IT system. I think the connection is risk assessing where there is an overlap. Now, if the only connection is through email and attached documents, that's quite a small story to deal with. There is a challenge, of course there is, and anything can be attached, so we need to put something in place. But imagine that you are giving them a access to your system, and they've got a user and password, how they're going to get onto your system. That opens up a whole different scenario, because how are you protecting the integrity of that? So that's where, maybe two-factor authorization and so on would come in. So that's at a higher level. So it depends very much on the relationship between 145 and camos. Often there is a deeper relationship because you're using the same software. Maybe you're using Amos, for example. So both the camo and the 145 are accessing the same software. So who is managing that software? And how can we make sure that, and so on, it goes on. And then the vendor, the purveyor of Amos, is going to have a position on this. And it's about pulling it together. It's about identifying, as they said, the risk assessment, going through the different areas, identifying the risk, understanding what we need to do to be able to make the statement, having identified the exposures. We do not believe that there is a high level of threat, and we continue to monitor, and that should be sufficient. What the regulatory authorities are very good at is compliance auditing. So they're going to come along, they're going to want to see your process, your procedures, your policy, your training program. They're going to want to see that you've got a risk assessment program, and that's what they're going to be looking for. And that, to be honest, is not the difficult bit. The difficult bit is how can I demonstrate it's working? But regulatory authorities tend not to ask that. Having done SMS for more than 15 years, I find that the regulatory authorities are not very good at auditing SMS systems. They're very good at doing compliance audits of SMS systems, but they're not very good at doing performance audits of SMS systems because they don't ask performance questions. And they're not trained on it, to be fair. And EASA does not support it in a very good way. It's only recently that EASA is paying attention to the fact that when we have a root cause, we also have a number of contributing factors. We also have multiple root causes. Until the last few years, EASA would talk about the root cause as if it's some magical event or issue that if we fix it, everything goes away. Now they're getting a little bit better. They're talking about root causes and recognizing contributing factors. But if you look at the various documentation that we use, it doesn't easily support the identification and the understanding of the different contributing factors. Because in one event, you can have 2 or 3 root causes and 10 or 12 contributing factors. So how is that shown on the documents? So again, there's a way to go. There's a lot of work to go on here. All I'm saying and all I'm sharing with everybody is what we need to do is get the building blocks in place. We need to be talking about it. We need to have names within our organizations. Ideally, if you can make one person the project lead, it's going to be more chance to be successful, and recognize that the project lead is going to need resources, whether they're internal or external, but it's going to need resources to help get through this burden. I once spent some time, going back to SMS just for a second, I once spent some time, I did a 1-week SMS implementation course, and the student on this particular course was actually a pilot. He was an operating pilot and in a small airline, and he basically flew every day. I said, how many people in your department? He says, just me. I said, surely you have some assistants. He said, no, just me. I said, so who's writing your training manual? He says, I am. I said, who's writing your emergency response plan? He says, I am. I said, so are you stopping flying? No. He says, I fly every day. And you see where we're going with this. It was just not tenable. At the end of the week, he says, I'm going to see the accountable manager. I says, are you going to ask for resource? He said, no, I'm packing it in. I'm not doing it. He says, it's ridiculous. It's not possible to do it. And that's why EASA talks about the need for accountable managers to step up and to step up and recognize there is a workload that has to, and we can get through this. It's not, it's not a continuing workload. It's a hump. And with support, with help, with resource, we can get through this hump. We can get to the other side and do it in an effective way. So there are challenges. And anybody now, the websites are so important. The information systems are so important. If they did come down, we would be in trouble. So there is a potential risk there. I mean, you may have seen the same as me. I think it was about a year ago. British Airways was brought to its knees because the IT system, something went wrong and nobody could make a booking and so on and so on. And they couldn't operate for 2 or 3 days. And the cost was just horrendous. And it's trying to just preempt that. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Anybody else? Any questions?
Steve, hello. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Florin. Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Florin Bujak. I'm coming from Romania. I'm working in the 2 organizations. One in one operator, Fly Lily, and second one is Fly Safe. It's a small MRO, 145 line maintenance. So I raised some issues related to the information security to our CAA, to Romanian CAA, and for the moment they don't have an answer for that. It's about the digital data. As line maintenance organizations, line maintenance organization were involved in the updating of navigation database. So where I have to check if that data, which is provided by, let's see, from time to time by customer or by directly by Jepson or Collins or other database navigation database provider, that the data are accurate.
Yes.
This is the first question. Second one, many line maintenance, many maintenance organizations are using software as services like Amos, like Rusada, like I don't know, different other software. You know, all the data are stored in that server, in the provider servers. Maybe it will be web-based in Amazon or whatever. How I'm sure that the data is not intercepted and altered by the bad intention guys, and
Yes.
to transfer to me the other data. And
Yep.
also, if I have access, let's see, like to manufacturer maintenance data like Airbus Word or Boeing, how can I find that I'm act directly in the source, not to interfere with somebody else? Because
Yep.
finally, it's a digital data, all of them.
Mhm.
Okay, this is
These
my.
are absolutely perfect questions.
Yes,
And
what is stated exactly in the part is how to manage the internal to your system from hardware and software point of view,
it,
operating system, whatever, internet connectivity.
it doesn't answer the question, which
Yeah.
is why your CAA doesn't answer the question. But what I would be doing now with the Romanian CAA, because what you've just said to me is perfect, I would write an official questionnaire to the CAA, dated, of course, March, with less than 11 months to go. I will request answers to the following, please. How do you expect these to be addressed? Because I want guidance from the CAA, because that's what EASA said has to happen.
Yes.
And after 30 days, because they don't know what to do. So after 30 days, I would write back to the CAA and say, 30 days has passed. You have failed to respond. I understand that you have issues. This is not a criticism of you, but you failed to respond. Therefore, I'm going to put in a mandatory report about it and contact the EASA, because that's where it is. You see, it's okay to say you have to do something, you have to jump through hoops of burning fire, but if it's not real, how can we do it? And therein is the problem, because imagine now 2 or 3 or 5,000 vendors going to a provider, Amazon cloud services, and trying to audit them 2 or 3,000 times. So EASA has to make rulings. They have to say that anybody that is providing a service should be able to demonstrate the integrity of the system in the following way. And they haven't done this. They've said, go and ask your local authority what they expect.
Yes, in one of my last audit, they forced me to go to audit Airbus in order to to prove that the data are accurate. And I say, are you crazy?
That's a joke. That's not
I know
serious.
some guys from Airbus, and I discussed with them. They start to laugh, of course. And
Yeah,
finally,
of
in
course.
order to comply with the RCAA requirement, they prepare the checklist provide for me, and in order
Yeah,
to case close. Otherwise, I will remain with open finding, and
yeah.
I don't know how to do how
No,
to handle.
this is the ridiculousness of it. And
They
that's
asked
why I
they
said
asked me
you
to
need
go
to
to
get
audit
ahead of it.
Microsoft. Think about, they asked me to go to audit Microsoft in order to assure that the operating system Windows are stable. And I explain, well, what if it's Apple system? What is Linux? No, you have to go
Yeah.
to audit them.
No,
Come on.
these are. This is just. This is the worst aspect of competent authorities asking goofy requirements, completely disconnected from the reality of industry. And the only way we can address it is by documenting it. And don't ever be afraid to report to EASA if you're not getting an answer, because when you contact EASA, the question they ask is, have you contacted your regulatory authority? And the answer is yes. And this is the answer I got. The regulatory authority asked me to go and audit Bill Gates. It's not serious. And I need guidance. I need a correct approach, which is the correct for everybody, not just me. In any country, we've got multiple operators, multiple MROs, multiple airports. Are we saying that 70 different companies or 100 different companies have all got to organize audit Microsoft or Airbus? That's not serious. Across the entire European Union, it goes up into thousands. It's a joke. And if you're going to be serious, you've got to stop doing this foolishness. You're the competent authority. We're looking to you for guidance, not for stupid comments. And I'm completely familiar with this. And there is a consistent problem. And whenever we complain to EASA about competent authorities, everything goes quiet because it's a secret and they don't want to talk about it. But it's a reality. So again, protect yourself. Make sure that you've written down exactly what you require. And if you can't answer me, well, don't come and try and audit me against it, because I asked you what was required and the justification. And if they said you've got to audit Airbus, say, okay, that's fine. Of course I'll audit Airbus. Can you show me in the regulations where it points that I've got to audit the aircraft manufacturer? Because I can't see it. Can you show me where the regulation is?
No,
and over and over again, what you find out is that there isn't an exact requirement because it's ridiculous. They're making it up. And these are the problems that we face.
They consider it's a supplier. It's a product supplier. Of course, it's the digital data product. Mm-hmm. They consider, you can, no matter what name it's in front of that company, Airbus, Microsoft, Honeywell, or whatever, you have to go because it's a supplier. It's your supplier. They provide data for you.
Okay.
Come on.
Here's another thing that you can do as well, because the entire process is risk-based. You can perform a tabletop exercise and document it and say, having looked at the potential exposure from Boeing, Airbus, Microsoft, then we do not believe that they are at a high level of exposure. We will continue to evaluate and look for examples of failures, because if Airbus is supplying data to literally thousands and thousands of companies, please show me one example where this data has been corrupted and caused a problem. And I would say that back to the authority. So it's quite important to you, obviously, that I've got to audit Airbus. Is there one example from the thousands of suppliers, thousands of customers that you have one example? And the answer is there isn't. So with zero example, you think it's a good idea to go and audit. Are you okay? You know, this is what risk assessment is about, guys.
Okay.
So if you think I'm pushing back hard on the authority, it's with the hindsight of 50 years experience. And also that EASA creates a lot of problems because they sit in the middle but deny responsibility. And there is a big part of the challenge. And if you try and fix something, you'll find that you don't get very far with EASA at all. These are challenges that we're going to face. And the development and delivery of this cyber story, it's not just 145, it's every domain. It's an enormous amount of work, and it's full of gaps, and it's normal that we expect gaps. What's not normal is the level of support that is not being provided from EASA to the competent authorities to enable the competent authorities to address industry. There's gaps. It's easy to say to the competent authority that employs 20 or 30 people, you're not doing it correctly, but they are being fed by EASA with its 1,000 employees. So, let's see who is responsible here.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Any comments?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
One moment, please. Let me open my video. Right. I'm going back from work now. That's why you'll find me in the car. But I'm listening to the entire session here. My question is, I'm familiarized, not the detailed knowledge, but familiarized with the content of the EASA Regulation 303. So based on what you have said already and the presentation, and based on that familiarization that I've got regarding the regulation 303, any Part 145 could have a CISO, a Chief Information System Officer, who, as a general manager of that, can outsource all the rest process and procedures to a subcontractor under a contract. Am I right or wrong?
Partially right. Of course, you can outsource as much as you want, but in terms of how the outsource provider is going to work, because you're going to have an internal system which is generating reports within the organization. So the workers need to have the training. They need to understand what is required to report.
Yes.
Somebody needs to collect the reports and process the reports. So what my experience is, if you outsource at a certain level, it adds value. So if I outsource and involve a subject matter expert who sits with the, let's say, the safety team to support the process, that will add a tremendous value. If I try and outsource the whole program, it will actually cost more than if we do it ourselves. This is my experience.
Definitely, I should extend also my SMS system compliance to the subcontractor, meaning me, my quality system or my SMS system, the managers will have to do the audits to that subcontractor to verify the subcontractor's compliance to the requirements you have just outlined.
Yes. However, here's a point. We already, as part of our existing SMS, we already, let's say, outsource and subcontractors and include subcontractors where they're not regulatory approved under our quality and safety system already. So it's an extension of that. So I see it as step one, identifying the risk again. Step two, we will send out a self-audit check sheet to the suppliers. And based on the response, we'll decide how we're going to go the next step.
Exactly.
So maybe I've got 100 subcontractors to the organization. I'm going to send out the same document to the 100 subcontractors. Based on the return of that information, we're going to establish which ones we need to audit. And it's going to be essentially incorporated in our safety system oversight.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. The other question
ideally, it shouldn't generate too much more work if we embed it into our existing systems.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yes, quite.
You're very welcome, sir. Thank you for listening.
One more question, please.
Yes.
I haven't seen any IS requirements for Part 147 maintenance training organization, but they do have sensitive data. After all, these data are the pillars for people's aircraft maintenance licenses. So
yes,
I realize that there must be a need. There must be. However, I don't see it clearly in any regulation. Am I right or wrong?
You're right. And I will add a little bit more to that and say that in 147 organization, there is no requirement for a safety management system. So in order to have a cyber system, you would first of all have to have a safety management system in order to, let's say, be able to support the cyber system. So that's the challenge. I tend to agree, actually, that the safety management system is not going to add a lot of value into the 147. They have other issues, but their issues related to data management and data protection probably come within GDPR and other regulations. So it doesn't concern me, you know, as an exposure. If I was trying to measure the risk and say that's a real risk that the 147s are not managing the cyber and information security.
But still, especially exam data, they could be easily malicious and appearing students or and with
That's
certifications that they are fraud.
absolutely.
I'll give you the most bold example of that. Yeah,
You're in a super critical area,
exactly.
and I think separately, EASA with the regulatory authorities is trying to address this, but we've got another disparity here. For the pilots, we've got a European question bank, and we've got a European question bank managed by EASA. For the maintenance engineers, there should also be a European question bank managed by EASA, but they haven't made it. Instead, they've gone out to 1,500, 3,000 147s and said, you've got to make your own questions.
Exactly.
It's another massive disconnect.
I understand exactly
and it's,
what
you shame on EASA for not addressing these issues. You keep introducing more and more people to Cologne, but you don't fix these fundamental issues. We've already said you don't have any standards. You're pointing to standards which are only partially applicable without identifying the ones that are relevant. And now here we're talking about there is no maintenance question bank. And as a result, there is breaches. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I don't know when EASA is going to address it.
Yeah. And the last question, if you allow me, since this cybersecurity issue is absolutely critical, you mentioned about the responsibility of the accountable manager. Wouldn't you agree that the corporate statement of an accountable manager on 145, and not only in CAMOS and CAOS and every organization involved in aviation activities, should be amended to include an additional clear statement about the cybersecurity? Because we all know it's an upper secret that in many cases, accountable managers do not have a single knowledge about what we are talking about.
Okay. So an interesting comment about accountable managers, because they come from all different walks of life.
Exactly.
You could have an accountable manager who is an accountant. He could be a legal expert. He could also be a pilot. He could also be an engineer. But the thing about the accountable manager is he is not expected to be a subject matter expert. He's expected to have a level of knowledge and competence that allows him to engage with the responsibilities of the role and to have access to the finances to support the role. And actually, I'm okay with that. I think that's a good thing. I think where the disconnect comes is that sometimes the regulatory authorities are not assessing the accountable manager's behavior within the organization in the correct way. And maybe that's part of the problem.
That's why I believe that an amendment on the corporate standard will make them more aware about this critical issue.
Yeah. And what I see, because I'm involved in all the European countries, what I see is some regulatory authorities are very proactive with their engagement with the accountable managers, and other regulatory authorities, they're not. And we see it because we know which countries the regulatory authorities ask accountable managers and leadership team to do all sorts of nominated trainings. And other countries, it doesn't seem to matter. So we know which country is the most proactive, but this isn't something that we would share. It's not about trying to put down the regulatory authorities. It's about trying to support them by speaking up and fixing our problems together as an industry. Not hiding our problems. We need to expose them and fix them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Any comments, please? Just while we're waiting, to ask if anybody has any general feedback. How helpful was the presentation for 1 hour? If it shared something with you that you were not aware of, or if it's let's say, raise an awareness of the things that you need to look at. Any feedback is very welcome.
Certainly worth it, Steve. I mean, I don't think any of us. This has been a bit of a blindsided broadside, hasn't it? Really, you know, we're all just, I think, like recovering from the SMS implementation phase of the EASA, and then we get potentially struck with this as well. So yeah, I think these seminars, you know, giving us a heads up before even the competent authorities have actually sent us an email to say, oh, by the way, you now got to implement a cybersecurity process as well. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was great. It was really good. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. And just to say again, it's a work in progress. And when in the training, as I say, there's a Sofema Online training there with a discount. It's if you take that training and we go into detail about smaller organizations, it's not about throwing people at it. It's about how can we organize ourselves in the most efficient way so that we can cover all the areas, limit our exposure, and to be able to, you know, not just satisfy the audits, but actually satisfy ourselves that we have genuinely reduced our exposure. I was looking for case studies, and I found literally tens of case studies of organizations, things that I didn't even know about until I started looking. Boeing, Rolls-Royce, all of these, if you just need to do a search. If you do a information security cyber breach, Rolls-Royce, it will come up and you can read about it and see what happened. And you know, a lot of it, I'm reading and I'm going, wow, you know, how significant some of this stuff is. It happened with Boeing. Their core data was breached. And you think, you know, these actors, if they could lock up your data in such a way that they could get a ransom, they would do it tomorrow. Absolutely, they would. So there is a, you know, how to say it, there is a willingness to do bad things if they know how to do the bad things. And I think that's what this whole information security, cybersecurity story is about, you know, recognizing, you know, the protections. It's same with, you know, traveling on airplanes, isn't it? We all go through this, and it's a nauseous experience of queuing up, going through the security, going through the x-ray. But what it does is it means that it's safe. We have safe flights. Because we've done safety security training, if you read about hijackings in the 1950s and the 1960s, and see what happened when people could get onto an aeroplane with a bomb or with a gun and all the rest of it, and you see how different it is now. You know, the likelihood of getting on an aeroplane and it being hijacked now is infinitesimal. The likelihood, I'm not saying it can't happen, I'm just saying it's infinitesimally small. It wasn't that case. And I believe the same thing with our information and cybersecurity, that we can, you know, reduce the exposure to a very, very low level. Because the harder you make it for somebody to cause you harm, the less likely they're going to bother. They'll go somewhere else. So I think that this is a big part of the story as well, is that we put barriers in place that protect us.
Yeah, I think in terms of business risk, modern day business risk, obviously health and safety has always been a concern. It's been a concern through the actual, through the decades. But I think in terms of business reputational risks now with our clients, I think this is possibly one of the biggest risks at the moment. And I think, as you say, it can bring us to a standstill. It can shut us down overnight. So it certainly, I can see why it needs addressing. But I think, as we've said previous, I think that the authorities need to do it properly and so on. But it's good that at least we're like ahead of the curve, these guys that have attended today. So at least we can go away and start making those preparations.
Definitely. And collectively, the more you communicate with your authorities, the more the authorities then connect with the EASA. And for example, they say, we're getting a lot of questions because of gaps in this information and gaps in that information. And again, I don't think it's correct that EASA should point to any regulation or requirement that you have to pay for. I don't believe that that is the correct way to do the business. I believe that EASA should have all the information that we need to do the compliance related to the regulatory environment should be available through EASA.
Absolutely.
Why should I have to go and pay subscriptions to follow EASA? How is the regulatory authority going to audit me? Now, I've got, even some of our instructors are regulatory authority members. I've got many friends and contacts in the regulatory authority. And sometimes I ask them for a document that's been referenced and they said, no, we haven't got it. I said, well, how do you guys audit against the document you don't have?
Yeah.
So are we expecting every regulatory authority to buy these documents? Because how else can you reference it if you don't have it? And they don't buy the documents. So the whole thing is a disconnected mess.
Absolutely.
And again, where it goes wrong is where EASA is referencing external documents that have to be purchased without identifying exactly what part of the document is required. Because otherwise, 60% of the document is not relevant. It's not a serious way of doing business.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Any comments?
Well, my personal feedback is that your presentation was accurate, to the point, and above all, it demonstrates the extent and the amount of efforts that have to be made at multiple levels, not only by Part 147 organization, but for all organizations involved in aviation activities. And it seems to be a great lot, I would say. So there's lots of work to be done to the final, let's say, goal, which is the security of the data.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. I agree, by the way, and it's not like if we don't do it now, we're in trouble. I think it's a work in progress, and we could be talking about this subject in 2 or 3 years' time, and we will be in a better place, for sure we will. So it's a journey. It's a, let's say, steps on a journey to make things better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, so thank you very much. Let me tell you what will happen now. My colleagues will send, because we've got your email, they will send you the presentation, send you information on what the discount is available for. And as has already been mentioned, access to the library documents is free. Apologize, I understood some of you have had a problem. It's typical that when you talk about something, it's broken. I hope it's not a cyber attack, but the library will be working very soon, if it's not already, to give you access to the information security and cyber documents. And as I said, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, we will put it in our library. However, there has to be let's say, a caveat. If it is a document that is got a restriction on it, it's not legal for me to give it away free. So I get hold of lots of documents. And one example, which was very, very interesting, and this is for everybody, the ICAO annexes. So you're all familiar with ICAO annexes from 1 to 19. 19 is SMS, 17 is security, airports is 14, and so on and so on. 1, 6, and 8 is the main ones. Okay, so you're familiar with that. Now, if you want to get the ICAO annexes, you've got to pay about $400 each or thereabouts. So we're looking at a lot of money. So what to do? Well, I was having this conversation, and one of the students, I was in Germany, one of the students said, you could access them free. I said, really? I said, how? He said, go to the Swiss Regulatory Authority website, and they have a list of them, and you can download the latest annexes without charge. And I went and I had a look and I thought, wow, fantastic. So even though they are not supposed to be released, the Swiss authority have decided to put them there on the website. And if you want to search for it, FOCA, FOCA, ICAO, that's enough. It will find, and maybe Swiss, FOCA, ICAO, but you will get the entire ICAO annexes, FOC. And I think that's fantastic. That's because I would love to put them on my website, but I expect the day after I did that, I'd get a cease and desist and they'd be suing me because I've breached copyright. So this is it. Okay, so I finished. If there's no more questions, I wish you all success. Look forward to receiving emails from you from time to time. If there is any information we can help you with and to support you on the journey. And it is a journey. As I said, we'll be talking about this easily in 2 or 3 years' time. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Wish you bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.